Welcome back to Love Meets Literature. We are on episode 7, if anybody but me is keeping count. So our podcast is in first grade. We're slowly growing, quickly growing, I would say. Sorry, my lame jokes are really lame today, but that's okay. I'm not here to tell jokes. I'm here to talk about books. My name is Rachel, and I'm your host, and you can find me on Instagram at Paperbacks and Sketchbooks.
And I am Joe, your other host, and you can find us at Love Meets Literature.
Yes, so please do give us a follow on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube Music, wherever you get your podcasts, and it will help get our little podcast out there. So today we have a pretty fun episode that I'm excited to talk about. We kind of did our first buddy read, but not really a buddy read. I read them way before Joe did, so...
Yeah, I guess that's true.
But a bunch of buddy reads I've been in on social media, nobody follows the schedule. So I feel like as long as you're kind of reading the book in the same time frame, it's a buddy read.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And in my defense, there wasn't like a hard set schedule. It was just read this by this time.
Yeah, you're right. I just told you to read it by today. And you did, and I'm impressed. So
Thank you.
But what we did was we read the first 2 novellas in the Never Tell series. I guess you could call it a series. It's not really a series because none of the books are connected, but basically a group of thriller authors got together and they wrote these little stories for Amazon Prime. Sorry, if you could hear commotion in the background, that was our cat scratching on her scratchy post. She was looking me dead in the eye as she was doing it, and I was talking. Anyways, they wrote these little novellas for Amazon Prime, and they were free to Prime members, and they are also on Kindle Unlimited. So we decided to give the first 2 a shot. It was Everywhere You Look by Liv Constantine and The Ghostwriter by Loreth Ann White. They were very short. I think the first one was maybe 47 pages and the second one was 90 pages, if that. There was a lot to unpack in these little stories, and I'm ready to discuss later in this episode.
Yes, it is. I'm very excited to talk about them. I will mention, though, that I listened to them, and weirdly enough, they were both like the same length in terms of audio. I think the one that was 97 pages was only like an extra 20 minutes at most.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I think it was maybe just like how the narrator sort of did it. Like if there was a different narrator, it could have been faster, but I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I don't know. It might be because maybe with that, the first one, 47 pages, maybe the narrator was just talking really slow.
Yeah, I definitely think that the narrator talked slower, but it was more like the dialogue was fast, but the rest of it was kind of slower. And then in the other book, the 97-page one, it felt like it moved excruciatingly quick in, I guess, kind of a positive way. But I think it also makes a difference too. And obviously, most people always speed them up. So you can take whatever that is and then do the math. So I think I did 1.5 speed the entire time. So it was still reasonable. It was like, 45 minutes-ish.
That's not bad. Okay. So I'm looking forward to talking about those. But before we do, how has your reading been going this past week?
Not as strong as I would have liked.
Yeah, I know. I've been seeing you playing your little Pokemons instead of reading your book.
Pokemons. That's funny.
I feel like a boomer when I say Pokemons.
Yeah, it's because that's what all boomers say. But yes, I've been playing more video games than I probably should and reading a bit less. I did still read. I got through, I think, like another 30 pages or something.
So you read another few pages of the Witcher book?
Yes, the Baptism of Fire. And in my defense, the chapters are all between 40 and 50 pages each.
Yeah, that's a lot.
So there's never like a good stopping point. This time I got lucky and there was a perspective change halfway through. So I just called it quits there. But definitely could be reading more this week. How about you? How's your reading going?
It is going great. I just finished The Witch's Heart by Genevieve Gornichek, and it was amazing. It was her debut novel, and I believe it was published in 2021 or 2022, so it's a tad older. And I read this one for Myth of the Month book club on Instagram. It's for our June meeting, which isn't until July, but it's for the June book. This one was based around Norse mythology, and it was really, really fun. So I already finished it. I gave it 5 stars. I could give it infinite stars if I could. If you haven't noticed, listening to this podcast, I finish like 2 books a week. So
Yes.
it's what I do over here. Okay, I read books. I don't watch TV. I don't do anything else. My life is reading. So I don't even know where to begin with The Witch's Heart because there is just so much to unpack in this book. Basically, this book follows the story of Angrboda and Loki, who were married to each other in Norse mythology. And they have 3 children. They have Hel, they have Fenrir, and they have Jormungand, or whatever his name is.
Jormungandr.
It's really hard to pronounce. But yes, thank you. This story basically just follows them and the beginnings of their family and basically how it all fell apart. And it was really fun. It was really fun to read. So you start the story in part 1. There's no chapters, by the way. It just like keeps going, which is why I had no choice but to just read it all the way through when I started it, because no chapters. Where am I going to stop? So I just kept going naturally. Maybe that says something about me, but we're here and I've already finished it. The book starts off in part 1 where we get to meet Angrboda before she was Angrboda. She was somebody else, starts with a G. I can't remember the name. But she has always been this witch who lives in the forest. And she can see the future. And this really bad guy, he's a god. His name is Odin. He can, he wants her power or whatever. So he's kind of like the bad guy in this book, along with the rest of the gods in Asgard. And Angrboda is supposed to be the good person in this book. You have your antagonist and your protagonist, basically. So then we're following her. She's a witch living in a cave in the woods, blah, 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 blah. And then we meet Loki. So Loki meets Angrboda because he returned her heart to her, because her heart was stuck on this pyre that she was burning to death on. But Angrboda did not die. She's been burned 3 times and she's lived. Anyway, Loki found her heart, returned it to her, and then I guess they just started a relationship. But I loved the character of Loki in this book. The author wrote him so well, that sly trickster kind of character. So witty, so funny. The banter between him and Angrboda was amazing. That part alone, made me love this book. He was just written so well. And then you kind of start to kind of hate him towards the end because it seems like he betrayed Angrboda, but he didn't really betray her. He never would. He loves her. But he also has a second wife. So, I mean, what does that really say about him? But apparently he only took the second wife to appease the gods. So who knows? Again, there's a lot to this story. I am not even going through event after event after event in chronological order right now because I'm processing what I've read. But it was amazing. And then you get to the end and you find out the fates of Angrboda's 3 children. Hel was, I don't know, guard of the underworld or something. And then her other 2 sons, the snake became the sea monster, and then the giant wolf, I forget what the giant wolf did. He ate people whole or something. But it was really interesting, and I think you would actually like this book.
That does sound like something up my alley because I do really like mythology of all kind, and especially Norse mythology.
I have to say, after reading this book, Norse mythology is probably my favorite. It's
very interesting, and it goes really, really deep.
Yeah, I feel like this book only touched the surface level because if the author went deeper, it would have just gotten to be too much. But She kept it surface level, kind of went a little bit deeper, and it was really easy to follow and understand. And she included an appendix in the back of the book, which I don't have in front of me because it was a library book and I returned it today. But in the appendix, she described who all of these characters were, how they were related to each other, what they did in the myths. And then she included farther reading so you could actually read the original myths. So I thought that was really cool, and it gave her story more credibility with the mythology.
Yeah, that is really cool. I don't think I've ever heard of an author, I'm using air quotes here, but like properly crediting actual like other sources to read when it comes to mythology, at least. So that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, it was really cool. I loved it so much. It was The Witch's Heart by Genevieve Gornichek. Definitely one to check out because it was fabulous. And I still can't believe it was a debut novel because it was just so beautifully written, so well researched. And I read her author bio in the back, and she like actually studied Norse mythology or something like that in school. So she's like truly an expert on it. And I really hope she writes more. I don't know if she's written any more. I haven't looked into her. I hope she does because I really loved it, and it would be so interesting if she were to write like a second Norse mythology story based on different characters.
Sounds very interesting.
Yeah, so that's kind of where my reading is at this past week. I haven't really read much else because I was so immersed into The Witch's Heart, plus these 2 novellas that we are going to be chatting about. But before we jump into that, I just have to know, it's like a drill now. What are you obsessed with this week besides Pokemon?
This week, I mean, besides Pokemon is kind of hard because that's been a lot of what I've done this week. It's been such a nostalgia trip of just pulling out my old games. I even had my old save files on some of them.
Oh, you know what I forgot to do? I forgot to figure out what Pokemon I am.
Oh, that's true.
Hold on. I'm going to do that right now.
We're going to do a live quiz.
We're going to do a live quiz. Okay, here is a BuzzFeed quiz called Which Type of Pokemon Are You? So the first question is choose a place to travel. I can travel to Fiji, Phoenix, Hawaii, Maui, Hawaii, Albuquerque, New Mexico, South Korea, Ireland, Beijing, Rome, or Tokyo. I'm going to choose Maui, Hawaii. Ooh, next I get to choose a dessert. Why do BuzzFeed quizzes always make you choose a dessert? So let's see. My options are cake pops, gummy worms, rainbow cheesecake. That actually looks really disgusting. Macaroons, donuts, chocolate bars, ice cream, chocolate candy rocks, sour candy belts, or chocolate lava cake. Okay, now let's be real. Would you consider gummy worms a dessert?
No, I don't think so.
No, gummy worms and sour candy belts and chocolate candy rocks are not a dessert.
Well, I guess I would eat them after I probably had something as opposed... I would eat them as a snack.
Well, when I think of dessert, I think of like your pies, your cakes, your cookies, your stuff like that. I don't think of candy. But regardless, I'm going to choose gummy worms as my dessert. I just contradicted everything I said. Okay, choose an activity to do. Hang out with friends, rock climb, read a book, party, zipline, hike, go to the arcade, go to the amusement park, travel, or shop. Is this even a question? I'm going to read a book. Choose a gemstone. Ruby, opal, amethyst, sapphire, diamond, pearl, rose quartz, jade, alexandrite, or topaz. I'm going to go with amethyst because it's my favorite color. Amethyst is purple, in case you were unaware. Choose a personality trait. Okay, I'm not going to read all of these. These are a lot of big words. I'm going to say my personality trait is going to be friendliness. And now I get to choose a Pokeball. I can choose the original Pokeball, the Premier Ball, the Love Ball, the Master Ball, the Heavy Ball, the Dive Ball, the Ultra Ball, the Lure Ball, the Quick Ball, or the Net Ball. I have no idea what any of these balls do.
I'm not going to go through all of them, but what I will say is all of them have a unique trait to them, with the exception of the Premier Ball. That one is just a prettier version of the regular ball.
So what does the Master Ball do?
The Master Ball guarantees that you catch whatever Pokemon you use it on.
Oh, I'm choosing that one. And now I get to choose a superpower. I'm going to choose the ability to talk to animals because I want to be able to talk to Peaches. I am a water type. Congrats, you're a pretty relaxed and reserved person. You like to be relaxed and chill out with friends. Go get yourself a Gyarados. What is that?
A Gyarados. It is pronounced Gyarados.
Oh, okay, that makes more sense.
Gyarados is a giant, like, flying water dragon Pokemon. But because you got water, then I was right. You are what my favorite Pokemon is, which is called a Mudkip. He's just a cute little blue guy.
Yeah, you mentioned that last time, so I guess I'm just a cute little blue guy. That's what I am. That's my Pokemon type. I'm a water type. Does that surprise anybody? I have no idea.
I was actually going to say you're either a fairy type or a water type.
Interesting. I'm learning so much about Pokemons right now.
There's a lot of different types.
What is the plural of Pokemon? Is it actually Pokemon or is it Pokemons?
That's a good question. I guess I never really thought about it. I have multiple Pokemon games.
Okay, yes, but like, what if you're talking about like just collecting these creatures? These creatures are called Pokemon, right?
Yes, I have multiple Pokemons. I have multiple Pokemon.
It sounds better without the S.
I think it's without the S. A lot of people shorten it to Mons, like M-O-N, when they're typing, because it's easier to type. I think you would say Pokemon.
I've always been a fan of using the full word. I don't really like to abbreviate things.
If I'm talking, I'm not going to say Mons. I'll say Pokemons. But yeah, no, that just doesn't sound right. I don't think I've ever said Pokemons. I think I always say Pokemon.
All right, then. The plural of Pokemon is Pokemon. Okay, so obviously you're obsessed with Pokemon.
Extremely.
I have not been obsessed with Pokemon. I really don't know what I've been obsessed with. This is weird. You know, when you think about it, this makes me realize that I need more interests than just reading.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's definitely not like a bad obsession.
It's not. It's definitely one of the better ones. But I just always feel like whenever someone asks me what I like to do, my brain immediately goes to reading. And then when they ask me what books I like to read, I never know what to say.
It's always a hard question because it's like...
I read everything.
Right. It's like, do you like food? Well, of course. Okay, name your favorite food. And then you're like, oh, I can think of 1,000 foods that I love. But if someone said, name your favorite pizza, that's a lot easier.
It is, because it would just be plain cheese with pepperoni.
Exactly. So it's like, you need someone to ask you, like, what's your favorite thriller book? Or what's your favorite, mystery book or something?
I still could not answer that off the top of my head. I would have to pull up my Storygraph or my Goodreads and scroll through books that I've read in my lifetime, or as of when I created those, which was in 2022. So as of 2022, I would have to go and see what my favorite books are that I've read.
So can you think of one that like stands out as like your all-time favorite book?
I cannot.
I guess I don't think I can either now that I'm thinking about it.
It's so hard to choose a favorite book because there's so many types of genres, and then you have all your subgenres. So you could have like a favorite book in this genre, but then you think about another genre and you're like, oh, but I really like that book. And it's just so insanely hard to choose a favorite book of all time because you have to kind of go through all of the genres that you've ever read. And then you kind of just fall into this spiral like, I don't have a favorite book. And then you have a crisis about it.
I think it would be very fun to watch you do like a tier list of your different, like your favorite genres, and then break down the genres to like your favorite books of that genre that you've read.
If someone were to create the tier list for me, I could sort the books.
I could probably do that.
All right, then.
I could probably make you one that's like the different genres pretty easily. Getting the books might be a lot harder.
Well, if you go off of my Goodreads, there should be about nearly 300 read books on there.
That's a lot of books to put on one little poor tiermakerlist.com or whatever it's called.
It is a lot of books, but I could go through them and I could sort them because I would remember which ones I liked and which ones were kind of like meh.
Do you think you could define like a definitive number one, assuming they were all in front of you?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
It's too hard. I've read too many things, and then you just kind of forget about books after a while. Like, there's not really been a ton of books that have really like stuck with me. So maybe I haven't read my all-time favorite book yet.
That's something I didn't consider. I guess maybe it could be on the horizon.
It could be.
Your book soulmate, if you will.
My book soulmate. That's what I'm looking for. I'll get there one of these days. But as an obsession, I would say my current obsession is the strawberry shortcake latte from the coffee shop across the street.
That is extremely good.
And it's an extremely specific obsession.
That is true, yeah.
But I told my hairdresser about it too. I'm just telling everybody that I come across about this strawberry shortcake latte. It's so good. It has the little strawberry shortcake ice cream bar crumbles on top. It's delicious. And now I want one, even though it's past the time I should be drinking coffee right now. So, enough about Pokemons and strawberry shortcake lattes and having crises over not being able to choose a favorite book. Let's get into this episode. So we have two little short novellas that we have read, Everywhere You Look by Liv Constantine and The Ghost Rider by Laura Than White. And while these books were very, very small, a lot of things happened in them. Or maybe not a lot of things happened in them. We'll have to go through them. So the first one we read was Everywhere You Look by Liv Constantine. And this story was just so odd.
It was different, that's for sure.
This book, I don't really remember exactly how it started, but I know it started with our main character. What was her name?
I don't remember.
All right, so we had a very not memorable main character in this book. Her name is Jade.
That's what it was, Jade.
So thanks to Goodreads, I remember that her name is Jade. So we meet her at the beginning, and I think she's sitting in a diner or a restaurant somewhere in New York. And she looks out the window and she sees this man who looks like her dead father. And she's convinced it's her dead father. And when we got to that part, I was like, it's really going to be one of those books.
Yeah, it was like literally immediately. It was like 2 pages in. This is what's happening.
I was like, okay, so it's going to be one of those books where the dead guy is not dead. He's in fact alive. And this girl has to convince everybody she knows that her dead dad is not dead. I hate books like that.
I don't know. I guess I don't dislike the idea of something like that, but I definitely didn't like how it played out in this book.
No, the way it played out was so stupid.
For the lack of better words, yeah, you could say that.
So, okay. We also got to meet this guy that Jade was having relations with.
I feel like before we get to that, though, it is important to point out that for some reason, this book started off with 3 separate flashbacks. Because it walks forward, and then when you go to like the next chapter, it said a week earlier. And then it explains something. And then when it gets to the next chapter, it goes, 2 weeks earlier or something like that.
Yes, I remember now. Yeah, yep. It had. So we start with her in present day, I assume, sitting in this restaurant, sees her dead father. And then it goes to, I think, 3 weeks before. And then it goes to like a week before, and then like 3 days before. And it's just slowly progressing more towards the present, I think. Because at the end of the book, it's after she saw him outside of the restaurant. So we're slowly we went back in time, and then we're going back to the present day. So yeah, I did think that was odd. I kind of ignored that, to be honest. I was like, I don't really care if it's a flashback.
It didn't make sense to me, is like the best way to say it.
Well, I don't know why the author decided to go back in time after she saw her dead dad. Like, it literally, the characters, well, okay. The 3 weeks before part, when we meet her skeevy gentleman friend, his part in this book was like so unnecessary. He was like a plant. I keep calling him a plant because he was just there for no reason.
He was, I kept trying to look up the term. I can't remember what it is, but it's like the opposite of the movie trope thing, where it's like in movies, if you showcase a character or an item or something like that, then you need to make sure to use it later in the movie as well. The book didn't do that. Like, the guy played literally no role in the story.
I've read a book by this author before, and I also did not vibe with that book. So I should have known going into this one that I probably would not have enjoyed this one either. So, okay, the skeevy man's name was Benedict. He has a skeevy name for a skeevy man. So sorry to all the Benedicts out there. But we go on, and then our second flashback, which is a week before, or I don't really know, maybe it's a week after. This is how much we liked this book. We don't even remember the little details. But there is one point where she goes to her aunt's house and she tells her aunt that she's so convinced that her dad is alive. And her aunt basically tells her to stop talking about it.
And then she leaves.
And yeah, she just left.
The aunt, that is. The aunt just leaves.
The aunt just left after her niece tells her that she thinks her dad is still alive.
Which is the aunt's brother in this case.
I couldn't help but laugh when the aunt just left because I was like, why are we leaving? What's going on? Is he actually really alive? And I think at that point I was like, she knows something that this girl doesn't know.
Definitely, yeah.
So then Jade, okay, what I think is so funny about this book is that Jade's best friend just happened to be friends with a private investigator. It's just so convenient.
Yeah, and she's like, hey, here's his card.
And Jade's like, okay, let me call him up and I'll get him to help me out. And, he does. He helps her out. I think he got her access to autopsy records or whatever. And they discovered that the pinky finger on the dead guy was not the same pinky finger as her dad because her dad was missing the tip of his pinky.
Right.
Which I feel like that is something you would have to pay off the autopsy reporter to not report.
Spoilers if you're going to read this, by the way, if that wasn't clear.
This just all spoilers at this point.
The part that lost me a lot was like, eventually the aunt sort of comes clean and says that she was in on it with the dad. Mm-hmm. And the whole point of it was they faked his death. We'll get into why later. But the whole aspect of how they faked his death just made like zero sense to me.
It was so stupid. That's what it was.
She staged a car accident by rear-ending somebody.
Yep.
And then they swapped the bodies.
Yep.
And then they pushed his car into the river or something, or the ravine. Mm-hmm. And so then they pulled the car out of the ravine and then they saw the body and it was like all destroyed or whatever. And they're like, okay, it's him.
And didn't they take an already dead body and put it in the car?
Yes, they took like a cadaver. And because the aunt knew somebody that worked at the funeral home, like it felt the more that I'm saying this out loud, it feels more like a badly written Criminal Minds episode.
Talking about it now makes me realize how ridiculous this story actually was.
It almost, like, saying it out loud almost feels like a comedy. Like, I feel like you could rewrite this easily into a comedy.
Oh my God, it could be like a comedic thriller.
Yeah, it really could.
Those exist. That would be really funny, actually. Just like this woman going down to the morgue and being like, hey, I need a dead body to stage in a car accident to pretend to be my husband.
And then he's like, oh, yeah, we've got a couple of those. Let me help you out. Right?
So that part was ridiculous. So Jade continues her investigation with the help of the PI, and she ends up getting a key to a locker at a UPS store, right? And that's where she finds this. What was in there? What was in the locker? Was it her adoption papers?
It was something relevant to the case. I can't remember what it was. But also,
it was a newspaper article about a kidnapping at a hospital.
Oh, yeah. Which, why would you keep that in a locked up locker, by the way?
At the UPS store.
Yeah, and by the way, when she takes the key, Jade that is, goes into the UPS store and goes up to the UPS guy and is like, hey, I'm my aunt, but she's faking it, obviously, and says the aunt's name. I totally forgot where my deposit box is. Can you help me? And the guy just goes, oh, yeah, but it's a locker, by the way. And she goes, duh, I'm such a ditz, or whatever she says.
If I were the employee, I'd be like, I don't think I can grant you access to that.
Right. On one hand, you're like, I'm paid minimum wage. I don't care. On the other hand, you're like, what in the world? You should not be allowed to access this stuff. Like, absolutely not.
Maybe he just thought she was a little loony.
Maybe he was having like maybe what they didn't say was there was like a bunch of other customers that he's trying to help. And so he's just like, whatever, get out of here, lady.
Possibly. So then she found the newspaper article in the locker and she goes back and she reads it. She calls the PI and she's like, who's this person? And the PI is like, well, that's you. And that's how she discovers that she was kidnapped from a hospital by her father.
Right. And then it's just so ridiculous what I'm about to say. So then after she gets the newspaper clipping, that's when she confronts aunt and father because they like the PI gives him like the residence of her supposed kidnapper, who's her father. She goes there, confronts them. That's when they explain how they set up the dead body. And then the dad explains that he is her real dad, not just a kidnapper.
Right.
Because he had an affair with her real mom.
Yep.
And then it's believed that her pseudo stepdad was abusing her and also killed her actual mom. And so that's why the dad faked his death. So that way everyone could like go into hiding and then he would have enough. Oh, yeah. He would have enough money to treat Jade's cancer, who had cancer this entire time. I forgot about that.
I also forgot about that. That's how insignificant that part of the story was.
That's the whole reason he went in staged his death, because he needed life insurance money because he didn't have enough money to support her through her trial, her like experimental cancer treatment. Also, her actual dad, real dad, was a heart surgeon back before he kidnapped her. And so you're telling me a heart surgeon didn't have like a whole ton of money saved up, or like...
He is no Preston Burke.
Yeah, I guess not.
But no, that part was really ridiculous. And I actually forgot that that happened. I think my eyes were just glazing over that last part of the book because I was just like, okay, so first of all, how does Jade not know that she's sick?
I don't know.
Isn't she going to the hospital for stuff? Like...
The whole ending part just like didn't make any sense to me really at all.
Yeah, stuff like that is what makes me hate certain thrillers. So that was a wild ride. I think when it was revealed that her real dad kidnapped her because he was her real dad, but the stepdad didn't know, and he thought the stepdad would kill him if he found out. He was just like avoiding potentially being murdered.
What got me though this entire time was like, he went through all of this. Why didn't he just kill the guy, the evil stepdad? You're already committing a bunch of like insurance fraud. You know, you're obviously handling a dead body, which is probably a felony of some kind.
But we're forgetting one of the most important points of the story. The stepdad was killed in a bar fight.
Oh, that's true.
And that's why Jade's real dad could stop pretending to be dead and resume his real identity as a heart surgeon, because his threat to his life is gone.
However, he's going to have to serve some jail time for insurance fraud.
That I don't think him and his sister thought out.
Well, they literally talk about it. He's like, I can't come out of hiding because they'll get me for insurance fraud. And then they have a conversation for like 2 more minutes. And then by the end, they're like, okay, I'm going to come out of hiding. We'll just deal with the insurance fraud. Like,
well, I think their conversation at the end was like Jade was saying, oh, I'd rather have a dad behind bars than no dad at all. And it was just some super sappy thing.
Yeah. The other part that we glossed over a little bit, we talked about it in the beginning, but again, this Benedict character that's in the very beginning, that's like, he is just a sleazy guy, but he literally plays no part in the story.
Yeah, he is not important to any plot point at all.
At all. You could completely remove him from the story and make this like 25 pages long and it wouldn't change the story at all.
The author tried to bring him back, though, when Jade's PI told her that Benedict plagiarized a book.
Right. And then supposedly at the end, the dad reveals that he was the one that submitted it to like Harvard or something. And then Harvard cracked down on him and like fired him and stuff. But again, that does replace that with anything. And it doesn't matter. Like, just have him not even say those words. And it literally plays no part into the story. Like, I have no idea why he existed.
Benedict was just chilling. He was just, a character in the story. But I think that was a pretty good rundown of Everywhere You Look by Liv Constantine. We talked about titles of books a few episodes ago because we were talking about the titles of the Witcher books. I honestly have no idea where the title Everywhere You Look comes from. It might be because she thought that her dad was alive. Like she looked out the window and she saw him and then she kept seeing him everywhere.
I thought she only saw him the one time.
She did, but it's like a metaphorical thing. Like you see him in your mind alive, maybe.
Oh, she does talk about that a lot.
I don't really know, but that was kind of like a mediocre start to this novella collection for me. I gave it a whopping 2 stars. Its only redeeming quality was that the end was like kind of wholesome and sweet.
I mean, I didn't officially rate it on a platform, but my unofficial rating is this is an easy like 1 star. If you're able to give 0, it might be 0, but definitely a 1 for sure.
No stars. That's harsh.
I don't know how to say this without sounding rude, but again, that whole beginning portion of the story was literally just wasted time.
That's true. If they cut out Benedict, the story would have been like 20 pages.
You were like genuinely, you could have cut him out, made it 30 pages, and I would have been like, this is probably at least a 3 star. Like,
Benedict ruined it.
it's just pointless.
Yeah.
Or bring him back in a more prominent way of the story. Like, I don't know.
We see you have some bold feelings towards this book.
It bothered me a lot more than I realized it was going to until I started like thinking about it more and talking about it more.
Well, hopefully the Ghostwriter, which is book number 2, was better for you. So The Ghostwriter by Loreth Ann White. This book had a whole lot to unpack. It's going to take a bit to recount here what happened. But the beginning of the book was this woman. Do you remember her name?
No.
We're just bad at character names, apparently. Her name is Grace. Grace is a professional ghostwriter, hence the name of the book, The Ghostwriter. And she is going to this sort of remote island to talk to this woman whose name is Claudia. And she supposedly committed a crime way back in the day. And Grace is going there to talk to her about it, to potentially write a new memoir for Claudia. And this book starts with all these eerie vibes. I keep thinking it's going to go in one direction, but then it goes another. I especially thought it was going to be like this super creepy type of book after they mentioned that the ferryman's name was Charon.
Yeah.
But it didn't go that way.
No. It was interesting. Oh, the ferryman, by the way, Charon or Charon, I'm not actually sure how you're supposed to pronounce it, but that's the ferryman for the river Styx in Greek mythology.
Yes, and Grace made that connection in the book. She
Yeah.
had to do a double take. She was like, wait, what? Where am I going?
Well, didn't he say that his name was like Aaron or something, but it has, because he's like Norwegian, it has like a weird syllable or something to it?
Something like that. Something like that.
I mean, I also listened to this one, so I didn't read it, so I don't know how they spelt it.
It was in the book, it was spelled Charon.
Oh, okay.
She's going to this island and she doesn't have the best vibes because a previous person that was on this island like disappeared and died. And she's like, why do I have to go here? And her agent's like, this is a huge thing. This is a big thing. Claudia Blackwell never lets anyone talk to her. You have to go, Grace. Plus, you're from the same hometown. It's fantastic. Right. So Grace goes and she has a lot of anxiety about it because she doesn't want to get killed. And now that I think about it, there was a lot of foreshadowing going on in this book because things are not as they seem.
Well, there was another big reason that Grace was nervous about going, and that was because she was recently, or I should say she was still mourning the death of her husband.
Yes, which we later find out, why are you mourning the death of this man? Mm-hmm. Grace, you little con artist, you. But I have read a book by Loreth Ann White in the past. I read her book, The Maid's Diary, and I loved it. So I had really, really high hopes for this one. And I still think this one was like miles better than the other one that we read. But it would have worked really well if this was a full-length novel.
Yeah, that is really my biggest gripe with it, is like you didn't have enough time to kind of stew in the world and with the characters and everything.
All right, so let's rehash the Ghostwriter. Grace is on this island. She goes to Claudia's house on this island, and she is greeted by some of her people, like a servant, a handler, whoever it is. First, I remember this woman was there. Her name was December. I remember December because her name is December. And I thought she was going to play a bigger role in the story than she did when we first met her, but she didn't. She was just kind of there. December was chilling. She's kind of like a Benedict, really, but more useful. She had more of a role.
She was kind of just like a henchman, like a bodyguard.
Yeah, a little bit. And then I can't remember Claudia's actual assistant's name, but she had way more contact with Grace than any of them. She was the one that showed her around the house, and she would lock her door at night when she was sleeping, which I thought was super creepy. I would be freaking out. So the first night Grace is there, she learns that like she can't have a cell phone. She can't have any electronics, really. She can only use the recorder that they provide for her. And I was like, ooh, what's Claudia hiding? But I should have been thinking the whole time, what is Grace hiding? Okay, the twist ended up being really, really good, but we'll get into that. So Grace is there, and the first part where I was really like, ooh, what's about to go down was when she saw the message on the mirror in the steam where it was like, help, I don't know, gonna die or something. It was something
Well, that was
sinister.
after her first meeting with Claudia, wasn't it?
I don't remember where exactly it was in the story, but I know it was at some point towards the beginning. And that's where I thought something big was going to happen. But then it kind of like settled down for a little while again. And Claudia kept kind of like making excuses for everything. Or Grace went back in the bathroom and the message was gone when they were like, show us. And it was not there. So everything was just kind of like creepy vibes. And I was really digging the creepy vibes. I loved it. Like, I loved the whole, like, eerie, foggy, rainy island thing. We're kind of just chilling. Grace is working with Claudia. She's having all these doubts and thoughts, and she's worrying when she's going to die, when she's going to be pushed off a cliff, whatever it is. And then one night, I think the pivotal turning point in the story was when Grace was on her balcony when it was raining because she couldn't get out of her room because it was locked.
Mm-hmm.
And she saw a woman and a man downstairs in the grass. And the man looked like he was chasing the woman. And that's when Grace was like, I need to get off this island.
Yeah, she had like a crazy, Grace had like a crazy panic attack and was screaming or whatever. And then like December and the housekeeper and Claudia all showed up at her room and were like, what the heck's going on? Why are you acting crazy?
Right. And so Grace tried to tell them, and I think that's the part where she was going to show them the note in the bathroom, but then it was just mysteriously off the mirror because someone was like, well, maybe you should take a hot bath, like it'll help calm you down. The note was gone. Grace thought it was Claudia running away from this man in the grass.
Mm-hmm.
And Claudia was like, look at me, I can't run. I'm in a wheelchair. I haven't walked in years. So then Grace feels stupid for thinking that. But she shouldn't have felt stupid for thinking that.
One of the things that I liked about this a lot was there was a lot of subtlety, which is again like why I think it would have been stretched out over the course of like 300 pages. It would have been incredible.
Yeah.
But the sort of the next big part after the bath scene or like the panic attack, whatever you want to call it, they kind of went back to normal a little bit. Like she confronted Claudia about everything, and then she kind of just calmed down. And then they started just like writing the memoir.
Mm-hmm. Ooh, and then it started getting closer to the point where the previous writer who was there disappeared, and because Claudia had just revealed her big secret to the previous writer.
Right.
And then that writer disappeared, and Grace was inching closer to that moment.
Right. And one of the other important parts to know is that in the very first meeting between Grace and Claudia said there was someone else there that day.
Yes.
And Grace was taken aback by this because then it sounds like Claudia wasn't the one that allegedly killed her boyfriend and the boyfriend's lover and then also the boyfriend's little brother, something like that. That was the alleged crime that she committed. And then they went back to normal. They were starting to write the memoir. They almost got to the point, and then that's when Grace slips the cell phone
Yes.
from Claudia.
Yes. So Grace thinks it's weird that everyone on this island but her can have a cell phone because the ferryman said there's no cell service, but they have a cell phone. And Claudia spewed some garbage about, oh, I get cell service because of this and this and this. And Grace was like, okay. So the next time Claudia's phone was out and Claudia was distracted, Grace just discreetly took it.
Well, that set her like next plot or her next scheme into motion, which is the following day after taking the phone, she went and convinced the housekeeper to let Claudia go outside.
Right. And the housekeeper was very apprehensive about letting Claudia go outside.
Right, because Claudia is this frail older lady.
Supposedly.
Well, she's only a couple years older than Grace, but I guess she has some sort of disease that really like wore on her body, so she appears much older than she actually is.
So they go outside, and Grace is bringing them as close to the rocks as possible.
The rocky edge, yeah.
The rocky edge. And out there, Claudia starts rehashing her big secret. And that's where our little twist happens. And that's where I was like, ooh, did that really just happen? So basically, it was revealed that the other person in the woods was Grace. The other person was Grace. We mentioned briefly that Grace was mourning the death of her husband. It turns out that her husband died on a boat with his mistress because of engine failure. And it turns out Grace had a part in that. So Grace is no innocent woman.
No, not at all.
And it turns out that Claudia did not commit those crimes. Grace committed those crimes. Grace had a nickname because she was a stalker of this boy that she killed. And the boy was like afraid of her.
It was Claudia's boyfriend, and he was like, at first he didn't care about her, and then eventually he got kind of like nervous to be around her or scared to be around her.
Mm-hmm.
And then it turns out it was because Grace, who was nicknamed Stalker Walker, if I'm remembering correctly,
it was that.
Psychotic.
Yes. So Claudia purposely requested Grace for this memoir assignment, which wasn't even real, just so she could prove that she's innocent and Grace committed these crimes, because everybody back in their town thought Claudia did it.
Right. And that's why Claudia sort of pseudo exiled herself to this island, because she was all but charged with the crimes, essentially.
And it turns out Claudia can actually walk. She's not actually wheelchair bound. It was just all a ruse to get Grace to believe her little ploy that she was doing or whatever.
Right.
But it was wild. And I was like, wow.
I really like how the author explained everything, because it was like, you might be like, well, why didn't Claudia report this sooner? Well, it's because Claudia was in shock all this time and had essentially buried all of those memories about what happened because she was so in love with the boyfriend at the time. And again, this happened in high school, so, you're going to get traumatized from that. And so with work through her therapist, they sort of had like pseudo memory things come back. And one of the things was when Grace's husband died in that accident, it showed him and Grace like on pictures on TV, except Grace had a different name when she was back in high school. So that's why at first Claudia like didn't realize, and then upon seeing her face, like all the memories came back and everything, and that's when this whole plot was put into motion.
Yep, and it was brilliant.
It was.
It was brilliant. However, I still think it fell a little flat. Like, I think it had a lot of potential to be much grander than it was.
One of the last like twists that I liked, though, was that whole, oh yeah, that person we hired before you in this whole memoir thing is fake. Like, it doesn't exist. I thought that was really cool, because really the entire time I believed that this other person existed.
So did I. I was like, oh my gosh, this Noelle person she died. Why is Grace gonna go there and do the same thing and get herself killed?
Right. And then it explains it from Grace's perspective of why she made the risk of coming here. And it was like, I had to know if Claudia remembered something because then I would have to get rid of her. The amazing part of the end where she's like, that's the whole reason I'm a ghostwriter is because I stay out of the limelight and I can still like do all this stuff, which I thought was a really nice tie-in to the name of the book itself.
But Grace was full on ready to commit another murder if she had to.
Right. That she would have been up to like 5 or something.
Yeah, she's a serial killer.
Yeah, seriously.
But it was wild, and I think it was cleverly done. I just wish we could get a full-length book of this story.
Yeah, that's really the sort of the biggest gripe, because all of the characters were like good, with the exception of, like you mentioned, December was kind of, you could have just replaced it with a taxi driver and it wouldn't have changed the story. The therapist person as well also didn't really play much of a role.
Yeah, he wasn't super necessary. I understand why he was there, but they didn't really need to mention him.
Yeah, they didn't have to have him show up as a character.
Right.
Because at the end, right before Grace gets the opportunity to kill Claudia, Grace gets grabbed by the therapist and like held in place until authorities arrive. And I'm like, you could have just had December do that, and that would have made her character relevant to the story. But
that's true. Yeah. Who knows? I'm not in the brain of an author. I don't know what goes through their heads. But this one was good. It was better than the other one. I gave it 3 stars because I thought there were too many lagging points for me. There wasn't enough stuff happening.
Can you give me an example?
After something big would happen, it would kind of like lull back into their just like every day. And I feel like that would go on for longer than necessary. Whereas that could have been kind of like trimmed down a little bit and we could have gone back to our twisty creepiness.
I definitely get what you're saying, because like after the writing on the mirror, it was kind of like a lull, and then there was the panic attack, and then it was a lull. They even say that it was just like back to normal for 2 weeks. Like,
yeah, so I just wish there was more. Like, I get that more psychological type thrillers like this, not really a lot of stuff happens, but I just wish the not twisty stuff was still more exciting.
yeah, I definitely agree. I also am giving this a 3 star. Again, I haven't written it down anywhere, but when I made my mental note, it was 3 stars. And I'm kind of in the same boat. I wish it was more, I wish the downtime was more like banter between the characters. And you could hear more and like deepen their sort of relationship with each other, whether good or bad. I think it would also been a really great opportunity to pull that therapist character in, like through a lot of that. But it is a novella and it was only 97 pages, so
Yeah, you can only fit so much into that amount of time, but it was good. I'd say it was good. So for our first buddy read, I think it was interesting. I mean, it sucks that the books weren't better, but
true. I mean, I still enjoyed this like experience overall.
yeah, I thought it was really fun, and it definitely makes me want to buddy read like a full-length book in the future. We got to keep going with these though. There's 4 more in this Never Tell collection.
That's true. We do have to do the other 4.
But now that we've rehashed what we've read together, what have you been reading without me?
Without you.
Without me.
Well, like I mentioned, I'm reading The Baptism of Fire still. I did talk about starting the Age of Madness trilogy. I haven't done that yet. I was consumed a bit with the novellas. It's not like they took that much time, obviously, but it did make me shift my focus because I didn't want to be starting essentially 3 books or 4 books at the same time. Right. So I think I might still sit on that for a little bit. I just want to get back into my groove of reading. So I'll be focusing on the Witcher book and these novellas.
Well, in case you were wondering, I'm reading a lot of things right now. So I started my A Court of Thorns and Roses reread with one of my friends, and I'm basically rereading it to force her to read it. We're doing a buddy read. And apparently I'm very behind on this buddy read because she's already on like chapter 23 and I'm still on chapter 8. So I have some catching up to do and I really need to do that. But I'm reading a little bit slower this time around because I'm annotating. By annotating, I mean I'm just like underlining things that I like. I'm not an annotator, but I'm trying because I really want to be. Especially with books that I'm rereading. I think it's fun to like when you read it a second time, just to like mark things that you like or you remember liking. So then the next time you reread it, because who rereads a book only once, especially A Court of Thorns and Roses. Obviously, I'm going to be reading that more than twice. So it'd be fun to see like what I underlined each time. So that's why I'm doing it. And that's why I'm reading it very, very slow, because it does take time to kind of like underline, because you have to flatten the book, underline, do it in a straight line, and it's not easy. And then I'm also reading Crimson River, which is the 5th book of the Edens series by Devney Perry. And it is good so far. I'm only 15% into it, but each of the books in the Eden series, they're interconnected standalones, so you technically don't have to read them in order, but I would caution you to read them in order, because if you read them out of order, it can spoil things from previous books. But these are just silly little romance books. I mean, I shouldn't say they're silly, because there are some heavy topics in some of them. Like this one, Crimson River, the beginning starts, spoiler alert, the beginning starts with our main character, Lila, almost getting murdered in the woods by strangulation.
Yikes.
Yep. But it seems like her love interest is going to be this guy who is investigating this murderer. So I'm excited to read it. It's really good so far. And then I am also going to be starting the first book in the Heroes of Olympus series on audio. This is for my Percy Jackson buddy read, which I have mentioned in every single episode so far. But here I am mentioning it again, because why not? So that first book is called The Lost Hero. I haven't started it yet, but I will. I don't know what it's about, but I'm excited for that. So I've got some good stuff to read. And then I just picked up from the library the 3rd Bridgerton book, which I'm so tempted to start. But do I really need to start a 4th book? The answer would be no, I don't. We're going to hold off on that. It's not due until next month anyway, so I have plenty of time.
Yeah, you have clearly 3 others that need to get through so far.
I know, but to be fair, The Crimson River is a very short read. It's about 300 pages on Kindle, so it's not going to take me long to read at all. ACOTAR is going to take me a little bit longer because I am annotating, like I said, but again, I should be able to finish it maybe this weekend, maybe not. We'll see. And then The Lost Hero is on audio, so that should be a fairly quick read as well. I can just pop it on when I'm doing random things. So I just need to finish that 9 days from now, so I have time.
You got more than enough time.
I do. So we've got some great reads lined up. We've just read some pretty okay novellas. So I'm excited to actually dive into some books with some more substance.
Agreed.
So I hope everybody has a great reading week and you go outside. It's going to be hot here in the Chicago area. So, stay cool, read a book. And as always, happy reading.